Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Jason. It's Pastor Dave, and I got questions, and he's got answers. Dave, my curiosity is kind of a definition of a word, but then a little bit of description of what this word means in the Scripture. I've heard the word tribulation a lot. What does that word mean, and how does it point toward end times or prophecy, things like that? What is the time of tribulation?
Yeah, the time of tribulation, that's I guess in a loose kind of a definition, it's the wrath of God being poured out upon the final hours of the world in preparation. It's actually a purifying of the world and setting up of the kingdom that's coming. He's just kind of clearing the stage, so to speak. The tribulation is the final, generally speaking, it's the final 7 years of the history of man governing man. And the Great Tribulation seems to be more focused towards the final 3.5 years of the 7 years, where the first 3.5 years has to do with God's not so much judgment as it is as the revelation of a man coming on the scene that has all the answers, and he brings peace. He comes riding in as so to speak, symbolically as on a white horse with a bow, but it doesn't talk about arrows. It comes as a man of peace. And I believe the first 3.5 years he'll establish himself in the times of the tribulation as pretty much the man with the answer for all the woes of the world, mostly the economic issues and the strife and violence of the world. He'll come with answers. But then after 3.5 years, he'll stand in the temple and declare himself, really, he's more than just a man, he's God, and to be worshipped. Now, at that point, then, most of the world will be, as he describes in 2 Thessalonians in chapter 2, verse 10, he says that there will be a strong delusion given to those who did not receive the love of the truth. And so there's going to be a deception, a delusion that's going to be taking place. So people are going to fall for this and fall for the, as he describes later, actually the next verse, the lie. That's one that comes on the scene. And at the moment that happens, that's what triggers the wrath of God being poured out upon the earth. That's actually Revelation chapter 6 through 18, where the bulk of that is talking about the final 3.5 years of God's wrath being poured upon the world. But it's something that's not New Testament in the sense of only found there. It's something that Daniel alluded to. You'll find other verses in other prophets that kind of hint to a time of tribulation that is to be escaped. And not to be a part of, and all. So it is the final judgment of God. But I kind of look at it more like he's purifying the world in the sense of cleansing it of all that man has brought upon this world. And it's actually the escorting in of the kingdom that's going to reign, where Jesus will reign from Jerusalem for 1,000 years. So the tribulation, the final 7 years of man's history of man governing man, is basically what tribulation is.
Will the church be here?
Well, that's a great question, because there's so many that would really like to put us here. I don't want to be here, for one, but my want to has nothing to do with it. I find from the scriptures there really is a tremendous amount of evidence that gives us the idea that it says 2 times in the New Testament, we're not appointed unto wrath. That being the wrath of God, the final 7 years, especially the Great Tribulation, the 3.5 years, why would we be here? And the idea of us being here, he says no man knows the day or the hour. And if we were here, quite frankly, I know the day when Jesus is coming. If we're here in the tribulation and we're waiting for his return to the earth, it says when the Antichrist, the son of perdition, stands in the temple and declares himself to be God, Daniel says it's 1,290 days, and then he comes. So on the day, whatever day that might be, when he stands in the temple and CNN covering him with here is the man who has brought us all these answers. He's declaring himself to be God and to be worshipped, and the false prophet will be revealed. Start counting. It's 1,290 days. And so if I know the day of his coming, then what day is he talking about? That no man knows the day or the hour. I believe he's referring to that which I believe is the rapture of the church, which we're taken out of here. Actually, the final 7 years, to not keep hammering a point, but the final 7 years of the outpouring of the wrath of God and that whole scene is really Daniel's 70th final 7-year period that is in chapter 9, where there's 16 or 70 sevens year periods of time that are predetermined upon the nation of Israel. So the final 7 years is really for Israel. It's determined upon the nation of Israel. And so God's focus of attention is going to be taken off the church and placed upon Israel for a final 7 years, dealing with Israel like he had in the Old Testament. And it's determined upon the nation. It's not for the church. The church is going to be taken out of the way, and I believe that's part of the restraining of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that is holding back that one that's coming, that son of perdition that's going to be revealed to the world. There's a holding back, and I believe it's the church, but it's the church empowered by the Spirit. The Spirit's going to be taken off the church, and the church then is going to be what I believe is raptured and into the presence of, will be caught up together, 1 Thessalonians 4, in the air. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, in the twinkling of an eye, we're going to be changed. He's talking about it. He's talking about an event that's going to take place in the air, not on earth, but in the air. And the second coming has to do with the earth. This is in the air. And so I believe that we're going to be taken off the world, off this earth. It's called the rapture of the church, and I believe, by the way, it's coming soon. And it triggers then that final 7 years when his Spirit is taken off the church and placed upon the nation of Israel, which the final 7 years is determined upon the nation of Israel. And so they then become the witness to the world in that period of time. And there'll be numbers of people that will come to the Lord during that period of time. The 144,000 are all Israeli, and they are going to be turned on to the Lord and receive Jesus Christ. And I believe they're going to become like the Billy Grahams of the day. And many of them, there's 2 witnesses that appear, Jewish, very Jewish. And so I find that it's really the story of the tribulation is the story of the final hour of God determined for the nation of Israel. But it's his final moment for the man governing man. And so that day is going to be really escorted in, I believe, by the rapture of the church. And once we're out of the way, the restrainer is gone, and then comes the tribulation.
Well, there's a heck of an answer, and that's something worth digging into the prophetic words of those that spoke it in the Bible, and getting some of these answers. Boy, it's going to be an interesting time, and I guess the question now is are we in that time now? Are we nearing that time? I don't know. Maybe a question for another video. Hey, have a good day, and thanks for joining us.